Good morning, ladies. It's 9:29, so I'm going to light the Christ candle. Maybe. Well, so much for the cross candle. I'm sorry. Are we on? Okay. My little part is going to be very, very short. Happy New Year. And I wish all of you a Happy New Year. And I just wanted to, this is the 12 gifts I wish for you in 2023. Happiness deep down within. Serenity with each sunrise, success in each facet of your life, family beside you, close and caring friends, special memories of all the yesterdays, health inside you, love that never ends. A bright today with much to be thankful for. A path that leads to a beautiful tomorrow. And number 12, appreciation of all the wonderful things about you. We just lost David. I think he went to find a light for the candle. So, just a couple announcements. I did talk to Mary Cochran. She was in the hospital last week, but she's doing really good now. They found out she had a heart problem. They've taken care of it, and she really sounded wonderful on the phone. Ann Kohler, I don't have a report. How's Ann doing? Anyone know? Bev?
She's doing pretty good. She would like some cards and some information because she feels very low. I don't have her exact address, but she's in the assisted living place down on McDowell off of Hayden. I don't know the name of it. But
It's McDowell Village.
yeah.
And I have to
Andrea, what did you say? Okay. I talked to her right before the holidays, and you know, her comment, I've had a wonderful life and I'm ready to go. So anyone else in our circles who needs our prayers, our thoughts, who have not been well, does anyone know? All righty, here comes our wonderful Pastor David back, and he's going to light the Christ candle for us. I'll turn it over. I guess I need to invest in one of those electric candles. I have, the only candles I have at my house are real candles.
May I use it? I don't want to go up the stairs.
All right.
You may keep it. So
We have a candle. Oh, all right.
just pass it around.
And we are ready for Pastor David. Thank you.
Oh, we got a little one anyway there.
We got one in.
All right, here we go. Well, we have been studying what subject over the last number of weeks? This is our 5th time. Yeah, Shabbat, which means stop. So once again, we're stopping to take a look at this theme of Sabbath. This was a beautifully written chapter in our book. Really, I think. Okay. There we go. Beautifully written chapter in our book. We're going to start out with a little connection that most people have never seen between Goldilocks and Aristotle. So let's have a little picture of Goldilocks up on the screen. This is the conclusion of the great tale. You may remember that Goldilocks was guilty of breaking and entering, and while the bears were away on a family vacation, short trip, and she went in and had to search around to find things the way she wanted them, because initially she tried some porridge, and the first bowl was too hot, second bowl was too cold, and the third one was? Oh gosh, you know the story, right? Similarly, she tried to sit in a chair, and the first chair was too big, and the second chair was too little, and the third one was? Just right. Exactly. And then we see her here. Finally, she goes upstairs. She gets tired after all of this excitement, and she finds a bed that's too hard, and one that's too soft, and then one that's? Just right. That's right. Now, the second figure is Aristotle. We see this amazing bust of the great man. And in his book on ethics called the Nicomachean Ethics, he developed a principle that is really, you might think of as the Goldilocks principle. And it really is, it's sometimes called the principle of the golden mean. And it has to do with virtues and characteristics. And essentially, his idea is that there's an area that is just right that defines what's good. So for instance, you can be cowardly or you can be brash and foolhardy, but in the middle is courage. It's the place that's just right. And he goes on, you have temperance or self-control. On the one side of that, you have austerity, and on the other side of that, you have wantonness. When it comes to faith, on the one side, you have skepticism, on the other side, you have gullibility, right? You just believe anything at all. And then in the middle, you have kind of reasoned or measured trust. So you're getting this idea that there is a sort of a golden mean, or there is an area that is just right when it comes to many things in life. We're going to come back to that theme. So our theme, of course, is work in this particular chapter. And our author starts in a wonderful way, and we've covered this to some degree already in our earlier sessions, but by reminding us that work is part of the design of creation. So work is not something that appears, unfortunately, after the fall. It's built in to the period prior to the fall of life. Here we go. Now we got an expert. Good. We're going to double up here. Let's see, this is what we call a dramatic pause. Yes, let's give Sandra a round of applause. No, that's great.
That belongs to you now.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for that. Because many people have the view of life that work is to be avoided, that the ideal life is the leisured life where you don't have to work at all. And, this is the view that the work week is dreary, dull, and tiresome, and the weekends are your exciting time. Thank God it's Friday, not thank God it's Monday. And it's also just, this is in the kind of humor of our culture as well. There's a boss that once said to one of his employees, "You're always sick on the weekdays." And his worker said, "I have weekend immune system." Right? There was once a series of commercials I remember on TV that were very popular, and the punchline was, "It doesn't get any better than this." Well, all of them involved some form of vacation. Some beach, some chair, some moment where you were at a party, but you weren't working. And so to correct that misunderstanding, we need to kind of go back to life before the fall when things began to get complicated. And so we do that in our first scripture passage today, which is from Genesis. And part of what it means, God said to make human beings in our image and according to our likeness, is that they will exercise leadership. The word here is dominion over the fish of the sea and birds of the air and the cattle and the wild animals of the earth. And so say to the person next to you, you're royal, all right? This is a royal word. It's a royal word. And it means to have a kind of royal authority. Human beings are presented in Genesis as the crown of creation. When they're created, God says, "Oh, this is very good." And so they're the crown of creation, and they have a positive leadership role in the context of life. And then we see also in one verse later, in verse 28, God blessed them and said, be fruitful, famously, and multiply, fill the earth. So this is do family. This is live in such a way that you are generative, that you bring life into being and that you nurture it. I mean, that's a form of work, right, ladies? Family is a form of work, no doubt about it. There's a lot of work involved in doing family. And also in this wonderful passage, we have this word subdue. It's been a bit controversial in theological history, subdue it. And it's really a more complex Hebrew word. So you have to choose which English word you're going to use. It feels like you're going to control everything, but it's really more explore, come to understand. If you're going to exercise royal rule over something, if you're going to have the right type of leadership in the world, you need to understand the world. So that's a call to science. It's a call to study. It's a call to come to understand the ecosystem, as we would call it, how life fits together and how it works. And this is all work, right? And kind of exciting work. And then we go on in Genesis 2. Again, this is all before the fall, where we get some assignments for Adam and for Eve. And so we've had 3. And then they also get this assignment. It's kind of a second creation narrative. And the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to till, and told him to till and keep it. So this is stewardship, this wonderful word that we hear a lot in church. We're not only to exercise royal dominion over the earth, but we're to do so in such a way that we promote life in all its dimensions. We're to care for things. We're not to exploit things, but to care for them. That's a form of work. And then Adam gets to name the creatures. I mean, this is the first interest in zoology and biology, right? Did you ever have to take a biology class and you had to memorize all those Latin names, all the phylums and all the categories and everything? That's what we're talking about here. And then, when Eve is birthed out of Adam, we hear that they cling together and they become one. So this is the idea, picked up by Jesus in Matthew 19, that there's a work to be done relationally in life. That life's not a solitary business, that keeping covenants, achieving connection with other people, living into relationships where we have unity in our relationships. This is a one-on-one relationship in marriage, but also by implication, the relationships we have in groups like this one, in communities like the church, in broader communities, achieving oneness, unity. Is that a lot of work, right? In a divided world? That's a lot of work. And it's good work to achieve unity. It's good work. And then finally, this all has to do with the first verse. To be born in the image of God is to be a worker. Because remember, God works 6 days and rests on the 7th. But God is a worker. In fact, in theology, we know that although God is resting on the 7th, doesn't mean that, creation is left on its own. He's still maintaining life in its many dimensions. God is always working and doing wonderful work around us, creating beauty and giving us opportunities to connect with each other. He's always at work. And so that's part of the way we reflect his image. So this is a very positive view of work, right? 7 positive, wonderful ways that we work in just these first 2 chapters. But Genesis is a pretty deep book, and it also gives us another side of work. So here, this is the curse in Genesis. So things have broken down, rules have been disobeyed, people have become independent. As I mentioned on Sunday, shame and blame and discomfort and guilt and hiding have been introduced into creation where people are at odds with one another and with God. And so God responds by saying, you've listened to the voice of your wife, this is to Adam, and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, don't do it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all your days, and the thorns and thistles shall be there, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, of your face, you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. Notice, this is dust to dust, earth to earth, ashes to ashes. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. This introduces a couple of other aspects of work. And one is that work involves a struggle, right? There's a struggle for survival. Think of what it was like here to survive in the desert before we had water that came from Colorado. I mean, hard life to get by in this setting. And it was hard to get the water here. It was an amazing, incredible effort to do it. Thomas Hobbes famously said, life is lonely, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. That was his description of what life was like in his era. And that's why he saw life, like many people do, as a struggle. In fact, a power struggle. In his book Leviathan, he describes this. This is an element of life in the world that we live in. And work can feel like a necessity that is imposed on us just to get by, just to get through. There was once a man who went to his boss and said he needed a raise. He said, I need a raise. 2 companies are after me. And the boss said, which ones? He said, the electric company and the water company. There's a lot of people that are living always on the edge of bankruptcy. They don't have any savings, or they're in debt, and it's paycheck to paycheck. And it feels to them like work is just a struggle for survival. This passage also points out, and this is the realism of the Bible, that although nature is beautiful, it's also terrifying. How many of you saw the classic horror movie, The Shining, with Jack Nicholson, right? Do you remember that there were a lot of really scary scenes in that movie, which I won't go into, but the scariest for me was the opening scene where they are driving up to this retreat in the mountains, this hotel, just prior to the winter coming, because they're going to take care of it in the winter when nobody's there, when you can't get to it. And the mountains are initially shown as, these beautiful shining mountains, but as the music changes, the mountains become scary. And isn't that true? Mountains are very beautiful things, but if you've ever looked over the precipice, they're pretty terrifying as well. And so this struggle this struggle is partly a struggle with nature. There's a sense in which nature also opposes us as well as blesses us. I love rivers. I have always loved rivers, and I've always loved floating down rivers. But if you've ever been in a river where there was a flood happening, it's terrifying. So again, there's this dual dimension to nature that is right there beautifully in this passage. And so there's some work that's a struggle, and there's some work which is dangerous. And then Ecclesiastes 1:1-4, this is another dimension of work. That because we are creatures that are purposeful, how many of you like to have a to-do list? Okay? You like to have a to-do list. At some point in your day, you want to be checking something off. You're purposeful. You want to know at the end of the day, I accomplished something, right? I got through my list. That's purposefulness. Work can sometimes feel like it has no purpose. I remember when my wife was moving from teaching into parenting for a season. And she said to me, everything I do now as a parent, I have to do again. I fix this diaper and I got to do it again. A couple hours later, I wash these dishes, I got to do it again. It's just like, I'm in this repetition where I never really feel like I accomplished anything because the same task is coming up again. This is when we don't necessarily feel like our work has a futile aspect to it. So that's an interesting thing. And so in these words, these are the words of Solomon. He says, the words of the teacher, the son of David, Solomon, king in Jerusalem, vanity of vanities, vanity of vanities. Everything is a vanity. Everything is futile, meaningless. What do people gain from all the work at which they work under the sun, all the toil that they do? See, that's interesting. He chooses his words. So it's not work, it's toil. It feels different, doesn't it? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. There's no U-Haul behind a hearse. There's no hierarchy in the graveyard. Like Solomon worked so hard in his life to be number one. He wanted to be known as the smartest guy in the world. He published books. He wanted to build the most beautiful buildings. He wanted all the other kings to think, man, I wish I was like Solomon. And he achieved a lot of these things. And then at the end, he was feeling like, I'm just going to pass this all on to my kids, and I don't even like them. You know what I mean? Like this is we don't take anything away with it. And so this became an existential crisis for him in the book of Ecclesiastes. Like, I've done all this striving, and what in the end is it going to mean? And he's raising this profound point that in a short, brief life, work can feel like it always exists in the shadow of the end, that it's all going to get wiped away in the end. So that's a very powerful comment on work, on the negative side. And then we have this wonderful passage from Exodus with the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, the people of Israel are more numerous than the people of Egypt. And you want them to stop laboring. This is where Moses has asked Pharaoh to let the people go out into the desert, have a little break, kind of a weekend, and have a chance to worship God at the mountain. And Pharaoh's refusing. And he says that same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their supervisors, don't give the people straw to make bricks. Now, have any of you ever made bricks? And when I went to Malawi some years ago, part of what we did was make bricks. We were helping to build some homes there. And so, you have to use what's plentiful. Dirt is plentiful in Malawi, and so is grass. And so you let the grass kind of become straw, and it's the binder that keeps your bricks together. So it's very hard to make bricks with no binder. And Pharaoh says, don't let them have any straw, but make them produce the same number of bricks that they did previously. Don't diminish the expectations. For they are lazy. And that's why they cry, let's go and worship our God. Give them even more work. Let heavier work be laid on them. This is the fact that work can be a form of coercion. You can co-opt someone's labor, right? You can use your power over them to control what they're doing. And that happens dramatically in cases of slavery, like this one. And by the way, I don't know if you followed a month ago, and it'll be interesting to see how the American corporate sector and government responds to this. But as we passed some elements of our supply chain to China to take advantage of the low pay rates in China, right? The weaker standard of living, increased profitability. As we did that, we turned a blind eye to the fact that they were using subject peoples like the Uyghurs as slave labor. They were not letting them leave the area where they were contained. Couldn't go anywhere else in China. You couldn't pick what work you were going to do. You were going to work in these factories that they were building there. And our biggest tech companies all are using Uyghur labor to produce these devices that we have, right? So you can talk all you want about diversity and equity and inclusion, but if you are using slave labor to produce your products, to me, that's an impossible thing morally to justify. So we're going to have to figure out a way to disentangle ourselves from this, because they're an authoritarian regime that is co-opting people's labor no differently than the Egyptians did with the Israelites. This is when you use other people as tools for your purposes. And in fact, Pharaoh was building in failure. He wanted to humiliate them. He wanted to give them a task which was impossible to do. It's interesting, Solomon, who I just mentioned, in his attempt to become like a Pharaoh-like figure, a grand leader in this ancient Near Eastern world, he enslaved his own people. He began to enslave the Israelites in order to build buildings. It's interesting, isn't it? So it's always a temptation when you have a lot of power to coerce, and it can happen even in less, in our culture, not in obvious sort of ways of servitude. It's a story about a boss who bought a new Bentley, and one of his workers saw it and said to him, that is just an amazing car. And the boss said, listen, if you work hard, if you invest, if you, just try to achieve excellence every day and do some overtime, I can get another one of those next year. That's where you see other people's labor only in terms of your gain. That's a similar attitude. So our author, she makes the point that that essentially the Goldilocks principle comes into play here. And work can be proportionate or it can be disproportionate. And we know this in life. One donut's a good thing. Eating a dozen donuts at a sitting is too much. Can you be my chorus? Having one boyfriend or husband is a good thing. Having 10 husbands or boyfriends is too much, right? Babysitting 1 or 2 or 3 grandkids is a wonderful thing. 15 grandkids it's way too much, right? And it's the same thing with work. The sheer volume of work, as well as its character, can just be overwhelming. And so in response to the problems with work in the world, of which we've just had a list, God gives this gift of Sabbath in Exodus 31 and says to Moses, you got to tell the Israelites, keep the Sabbath. This is a spiritual sign between me and Israel through the generations. And it's given so that you can know that I want to make you whole. Holy is wholeness. I want you to be whole, not broken. You shall keep the Sabbath because it's holy for you, and everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it shall be cut off. For 6 days you'll work, and on the 7th you'll rest. It's a holy day, a wholeness day. Therefore you should keep it and observe it throughout every generation as a sign of our connection and our covenant. It's a sign forever. And then this is this gift that God gives through Sabbath. Whoever fails to rest, the implication is, turns work into a form of self-imposed slavery. They make work into a god, and they fail to honor God. And so when we overwork, when it becomes disproportionate, its purpose changes from a way of reflecting God's image and building the kingdom and advancing society and blessing people around us, all these good purposes that work can have, and it becomes about, my ego, and I can't let go of it. I can't rest. I can't honor others in what I'm doing. So the issue is raised, the final issue I want to talk about today is, what is good work then? In a world where that work can be good or it can be bad, as we've seen. What does it mean to have good work? How do we understand that? And we have this interesting passage from Exodus 36. The author points out that in Exodus there are 13 chapters that have to do with slavery, and then there are bad work, and then there's 13 chapters at the end that have to do with good work, that have to do with constructing the tabernacle. And they can seem pretty technical for us, but I think it's quite clever on her part to point out that they're really an example of what it means to do good work. And so we find, for instance, that work, Bezalel and Oholiab, and every skilled person to whom the Lord had given skill and understanding to know how to do any work in the construction of the sanctuary shall work in accordance with what the Lord has asked. Moses then called these 2 leaders and every skilled person to whom he'd given skill, everyone whose heart was stirred to come to do the work. And they received from Moses all the offerings the Israelites had brought. So here's a picture of a community that has a common purpose, not imposed, not coerced, but they've decided they want a worship center. They want to reflect in the heart of their life their commitment to God, and so they want this sanctuary. And they decide to cooperate and to work together for the building of it. And the first part of that is to nominate leadership, right? And so they look around to see who's gifted, who has the skills for this task. And here we have the names of these 2 particular people who were called to it. And so we have hints in just these few verses on what good work is. And I want to just hit a couple of them. Were people tired in Israel after working all day on the sanctuary? Yes. But have you ever known the difference between a good tired and a bad tired? Right? There's a good tired. Like when you put in a good day at work and it's meaningful and it's purposeful and you feel God's presence and you know you're doing a task he wants you to do, it's a good tired, right? It's a satisfying tired. And then there's those days where you get to the end of the day and it's a bad tired. You're just exhausted. This was a good tired because they were doing something that was worthwhile. They had good direction. Now, work requires direction. So people have to be in charge, right? And you can have Pharaoh in charge, or you can have these guys who did a good job. They respected their workers. They encouraged them. They looked for people who were gifted and assigned those tasks to them. So they were servant leaders. They were respectful. And that's part of what good work is. And then the fact that it's voluntary is crucial. No one's being coerced to do this. They're excited to do it. They're stirred up. Their hearts are moved. They want to get going, when you get in your 60s, you have to think about retirement. So I have to have a plan for this. I'm asking people, how'd you know when you should retire and what are the signs of all that sort of thing? And, I think one of them is when you're not excited to come to work, Fortunately, I am very excited to come to work. Work is a highlight in my day, but that's a sign. They were excited to come. And then it was proportionate. Again, it was the Goldilocks rule. It wasn't too little, it wasn't too much, it was just right. And I put that down under the principle that the monks used to keep work and worship in balance. They called it labore et orare. We're going to work and we're going to pray. We're going to stop work at certain times to pray, and we're going to stop praying at times to work. We're going to keep it all in proportion. And so when I teach about work, I basically say, here are 4 purposes. One is survival. Sometimes we don't get the work we want, but we need to work, right? The best book on the status of equality and inequality in America has just been published by Phil Graham. It is a fascinating read. And it shows that a lot of the things we've been told about inequality in America are not true, interestingly. They're just not true. Because government statistics on inequality left out the taxes that were imposed on the top 20%, the top 2 quintiles, out of account. It didn't count the amount that was taken from them and redistributed. So it made them look richer than they are. And it didn't count the transfer payments that went to the bottom quintile. So inequality isn't the way it's been described for us in America. It's very, very interesting. Inequality has not been growing over the last 2 generations. It's been lessening. And social mobility has never been higher in America. People moving out of the bottom 20% to the next 2 quintiles, and people moving down. And the key element in it all is work. The only people that have not done better than their parents over the last generation and a half are the people that chose not to work. It's very interesting. So it's a book that's well worth reading. So there's survival. We also work in order to provide. I'll have to get that for you. But if you Google Phil Graham's recent book, he's used to serve in the legislature, but he's an economist, and it's interesting. He's a Republican, but he wrote it with a couple of academic Democrat guys. So it's a fascinating read. Very good. Anyway, service is another point of work. We support others. And a lot of times we're working in order to support others and other good causes. We work, we save, we give away, and that's an important purpose of work. And then there's work that realizes who we are. This is when we really get the sweet spot, where what we love to do, we are doing. What we're passionate about, that's our work. And it doesn't even feel like work, because we love doing whatever that thing is. We're expressing ourselves while we're working. And finally, the highest level of work is we're demonstrating our faith. And we are developing relationships. We are becoming witnesses and those who display the love and the purpose of God in the midst of our work. So there we are. Are there questions or comments on any of that? So just a little perspective there. based on this wonderful chapter that we've got.
David, I think, I do have a question.
Yeah.
In the book, it talked about how you can support your staff at your church on Sundays. And I just don't quite know the answer to that. You know, I think of that quite often because it's also your Sabbath day as well. But I feel I'm making an excuse. I'm saying you're doing God's work because you are doing God's work. You're trying to fill our hearts with what's in the Bible in order to go out to the world and make it a better place. But there's still that question: how do we support the staff that's having to work on the Sabbath, or how do you do that in your mind? How do you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a couple things. You know, churches have different cultures. You know, this is a very loving, supportive community, extremely so. And, you know, there's harsh communities that just by nature, there's some church communities that, you know, they may love their pastor, but man, they just kill her or him as well, you know, through demand. But I wouldn't say that this community is like that. It has a culture of care and concern, and that's expressed institutionally. Like, for instance, the deacons have a committee that is there for staff support. And so they have, you know, lunches to honor the staff, and they send you birthday cards, and, you know, there's just a sense of ongoing care. And then also our tradition is one where it built into the contracts of pastors are study leaves and a certain amount of time off. And so the personnel committee and the session are there partly to make sure that pastors honor that, you know, and they take some time. They realize it's a marathon, not a sprint, and they you know, are investing in their own growth and so on. But in the end of the day, you really need to have certain disciplines in your life that you are encouraging, and you're encouraging in the people that you work with as well. You know, I take Thursdays is my day off. And you have to, you know, think about it like we've been talking about at Sabbath. What are the things that renew you, and what are the things that relax you, and what, you know, how do you invest in those things in that period of time when you're not, you know, when you're not working? My father, his middle name was Bonthrin, and we used to joke about it because we had one part of the family that was hyperactive. And one part of the family was like, you know, the Goldilocks principle. They were hyperactive. And then we had another part of the family on his side that were a little bit lazy, right? And so I have a little bit of that lazy part in me. Like, I don't have any problem relaxing on my day off. So I'm glad for the genetics there. Yeah. But I do think that the other part I think we want to be aware of is just that there are, in any given role, there's going to be things that are renewing and things that are hard. And that's true of every job, and it definitely is true of the ministry as well. So I think the other part of it is to try to, this is harder in a solo church where someone is just, you know, that woman or that man has just got to do what they have to do. In a church like ours, you can try to apportion the work in such a way that people are in their sweet spot more than they're in their hard spot. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of work and all the potential, the goodness of work, that we work alongside you and we work to build the kingdom. We work to use our gifts. We work to support and bless others. And there's just good work to be done, whether it counts in the Bureau of Labor Statistics or not, whether it's done in the home or in the marketplace. There is good work to be done, and we know you're alongside of us in that. And at the same time, we know that work can be threatening and demeaning and difficult, and so we want just work to be happening around us, wholesome work, and we want to be able to work in ways that honor you. So help us to do that. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.